I think this just happened on Tuesday, correct? Colin Kaepernick announced a new campaign that Nike was doing, and within literally minutes of this campaign being announced, there was calls to boycott Nike. Nike's shares actually fell on the New York Stock Exchange. I think they recovered as the day went on. But it's one of these tempest in a teapots that used to take days to unwind, and literally this happened in real time in like a few hours. And by the end of the day, they were already talking about how much money Nike made from just social media impressions and the story being out there and being talked about and what it really meant. So I've of course read about this, and I was kind of.
Why don't we give the backstory who Colin is?
Go ahead.
For people who don't know. So he was a quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, and he's the NFL player that started the kneeling during the national anthem to protest the way that law enforcement or justice was being served on people of color, or particularly African American men. So during the national anthem, he would kneel, and then it became a big controversy as people viewed it as being disrespectful to our military or disrespectful to the flag. And then, of course, our president jumped on and created this whole kerfuffle with the NFL to get the NFL owners involved as other teams and other players began kneeling. Lo and behold, Colin ends up not on a team.
Yep.
Or ends up being not used.
Released, yep.
And Nike had actually signed him back in 2011, but hadn't used him since 2016 in advertising. And so everybody was kind of surprised when this ad came out. And do you have the headline there of what the ad says? It is there. It's on the screen.
Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, and then there's a swoop at the bottom and it says just do it. And yeah, so a lot of people weighed in, a lot of talking heads weighed in. People were cutting the tops of their socks off. The local news showed someone burning a pair of sneakers. I mean, I watched this last night and I was like, this is news. They're showing someone with a propane the kind of thing you'd make creme brulee with, frankly, glaze the top. But they burned the sneakers. Some guy who was a cameraman for some news crew immediately cut the tops of his socks off because he was an ex-Marine, and how dare they do this. What's lost in all of this, of course, is that Colin Kaepernick started taking in the knee during the national anthem to protest, as you said earlier, police brutality. Had nothing to do with the flag, and certainly nothing to do with the military, but savvy politicians jumped on the bandwagon pretty quick, and they stoked the flames, which made Tim and I think about this a little bit, because both of our careers are in advertising and marketing. And sports, well, marketing, associating a brand with a personality has always been a tricky thing.
Yep.
And it can go one way or the other. And I had this experience once when I went to Tim and I had a sports team that wanted sponsorship. It was for a thing called Primal Quest, I think it was. It was in Fiji or something. It was an all-gay team. Tim approved the budget, but he said to me in one of the final phone calls, he said, hey, just to let you know, you don't expect much. They're either going to win or they're not. It's a binary thing. They either do great or they don't. But that was a limited thing. That was a small thing. When it comes to personalities, though, that you align with, you don't know what they're going to do beyond your brand.
Well, no, and as Buick found out with Tiger Woods, yep, or as I had experienced with both Martina Navratilova and Lance Armstrong, both controversial for different reasons. Everybody accused Lance of doping, but at that point when we were working with him, it wasn't. It was just an allegation at that time. Yep. And Martina, because of the fact that she was a out tennis player, was also some issues there, and the brand was scared that it was going to tarnish the brand, it was going to hurt the brand, and how could you associate with a lesbian? And so, yeah, there is always a danger. I was surprised here because, first of all, I think Nike has become stale. I think they're a lot like General Motors. They somewhat became stale. And so my thought was, well, here's a way for them to become relevant.
Oh, yeah.
And that was what a few other people said. And they said, however, with as dicey as things are in the retail market space or in the sports clothing space anyway, you have to be very careful what you do, because this could either hurt or help the brand. As you said, stock price went down.
Yep.
And people are now saying, they should have used Pat Tillman was an example. We have an example of the ad if you're watching. That's somebody that actually did quit the NFL and went into and enlisted in the military, and was killed in action in Afghanistan. And they said that I don't know if it was Afghanistan or Iraq. I know he was killed in
But either way, it was right after the
Right.
the 9/11.
But Kaepernick had a $149 million contract for 5 years with the San Francisco 49ers. He didn't finish out the contract, so he only collected 20 or 30 million. They're estimating his Nike contract is somewhere between 12 and 40 million. It's going to include apparel, going to include clothing and shoes. Nike hasn't totally confirmed that. But when I see an ad that says sacrifice everything, even if you sacrifice, I forget exactly what the exact phrase was again. But essentially, I don't really feel sorry for him and getting 40 million bucks. Do you? Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. You just picked up 40 mil.
Yeah, and
Would you say? And you're not getting your head knocked around.
no. So yeah, you wrapped that up pretty nicely.
But the president and you and I
he
talked
hasn't
about
weighed
this
in
before.
on this.
Oh,
by
yes.
the way.
Oh, yes.
He has.
He
Okay.
said it's a mess. The ad's a mess. Nike's a mess. The whole thing's a mess. The president's weighed in on it. But what the president has done here is created this narrative again with his base, and it's perception's reality.
Yeah.
He's made this about the flag. He's made this about the military and about patriotism. And no matter how Nike or anybody else tries to fix it, I'm not so sure I'm not so sure the sides are gonna change.
You could say to the cows come home. You could talk and talk and talk about no, it's not why they take the knee. It doesn't. That's all being drowned out by the buzz.
And you said that you had made the point. You said it's his right to do that.
Yeah.
But then someone else said, well, he works for you're an
company.
employee.
Yeah.
And do you do that on your time when you're an employee and you're supposed to be bringing tickets in for the franchise?
On the plus side, the team at Nike's marketing department can breathe a bit easy because this one article says in 24 hours since Kaepernick first revealed the spot on Twitter, Nike received more than 43 million worth of free media exposure. The vast majority of it was neutral to positive. And what's more, the move sends a strong signal to their current roster of athletes and positions that Nike is a savvy risk taker. So there's a little bit more going on behind the scenes here, and
It makes them look relevant.
the people you pissed off, they're not really buying as much of this as you think. So it's just a lot of like hand wringing. But that was
Well, how many of those people are buying Nike?
and you used to say that all the time when people
Subaru,
would
right.
ding the brand.
I'm not buying your car. You weren't going to
for
anyway.
LGBT. They weren't shopping for it.
Sell
to begin
cars to
with.
educated smart people.
So another, you used to shut that stuff down quite nicely in interviews. You'd be like, well, here's what we make the car for.
Yeah, here's who
thinks
buys the
buying
car.
it.
I'm sorry if it doesn't fit your narrative.
A quick one that Tim found, which I highly approve of, and I think it's a fascinating little twist here. France has banned all children under 15 from using their phones in school. So what happens here is there had been a rule in place about cell phone and mobile device use, tablets, etc. They've extended it now to be the entire school day, including lunches and recesses. So a child goes to school in France, the phone gets put in a locker, or it's up to the school how they put the phone away, and they can't use it again to the end of the day. I have zero problem with this. And when we were talking about it, the very few times our parents had to reach us at school, they called the principal's office.
And we were laughing about this. A handful of times over my time in school, I remember a kid being taken out of class for a family emergency or something.
Rare.
The fact of this, I think this is a great thing. It's a national wide rule, right? In France, at schools when you're 15 or under. I love the idea. I'm wondering if something like that could ever happen in the U.S.
I highly
think
doubt
we're
it.
too big.
Highly doubt it. And this
Only what 12 million kids they said it
yeah.
represents.
And this is delivering on a promise that President Macron made when he was elected. And you're right, Tim. I mean, geographically, France is the size of Texas, even though the population density is much higher than Texas. I don't know that you'd be able to pull that off here.
So the law was introduced amid fears that students were becoming too dependent and distracted by their smartphones. I agree.
Even if they weren't dependent, just the distraction is all the part I heard loud and clear. Because you're not supposed to be distracted while you're learning. But
What would your mother think of that as a
she'd
teacher?
highly approve. Oh boy, would she approve of this?
I wonder about. I've asked a few people who were professors now in colleges, and they said it's so out of control.
Yeah.
And but the kids saying they're taking notes. You know, you're not.
That's a prime example. So I have a friend who teaches up at Williams, and he said half the class tap 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 tap, tap they're taking notes on laptop, the other half handwrite the notes. Guess who does better on exams? Handwritten note takers. Yeah, the science has proved this, that we retain knowledge differently when we write it. There's a mechanical thing.
That's a quick sidebar. So when people started doing bring the little laptop in.
I know where you're going.
With Karen Allen.
No, I don't know this one. That was Jay bringing the typewriter to class.
No, this was. We were in the boardroom, and Karen Allen was my counterpart in advertising. She was a South Jersey truth.
I love
through and
Karen.
through, solid individual. And we're sitting there, and this woman takes out her laptop, and it's Karen's like, "Yo, what's going on?" She's like, "I'm taking notes." "No, you're not. Pad and paper." She's like, "That's too noisy. I'm not talking over all that tapping."
Yeah, I can see Karen doing that. Pad and paper.
Yo, what's going on? And she's like, "I'm taking notes." "No, you're not. Pad and paper. I'm not talking over all that tapping." But can you imagine now? I'm sure probably in a class.
I've been in meetings with when I owned my agency. I would go to a client meeting, and the laptops, the lids open, and I'm thinking to myself, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And half the time, I bet you they weren't even bothering taking notes. It was like
on Facebook,
like I'll see you at sushi place at 6 or
Twitter or something. What was the final story you found?
Final story was a story that I came across, which I loved.
This is such a John story.
It's called "The Illusion of Control: Why the World is Full of Buttons That Don't Work." You know, here in New York, you ever wonder, you come to a street crossing, right? And there's a button on a pole, and it says press to activate the crosswalk, or press to walk. And you push it and you wait, and the light changes, like, oh, the button works. Turns out that's not the case, and that many buttons in our lives just don't do anything. In New York alone, about 100 of the 1,000 crosswalk buttons actually function.
Well, they were saying that they used to work.
They used to.
And what has happened is, as cities have grown, and they talk about Boston and a few other places, as cities have grown, those buttons that did work, they deactivated them, but just never changed them, because now they're more sophisticated with traffic patterns, and these stopping the traffic all the time screws up traffic flow. So I laughed, and I figured, why not? They just disconnect them.
So now they call them placebo buttons. So it's like taking a placebo pill, right? So you take something that you think it's going to make you feel better.
But you feel better because you've done
push
something.
You act. So the next thing up was not just crosswalks, but elevator doors. So if you're hearing this and you're in the United States of America, trust me, if you push the door close button, it ain't doing anything.
See, I disagreed with that. I've been on elevators where I think it does work.
I have too, and there are some that have an override, or someone has forgotten to turn off the fireman's thing. But basically, the door open, door close thing is activated only by a key in the master control panel of the elevator that the fire department or first responders use, because that gives them control of the elevator.
Do you boys think the elevators work like that? I don't know.
It feels like it, but placebos are powerful.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking there's a lot of things that don't really work, and I just make it up in my head.
Now, if you're outside the U.S., apparently closing if you're in Paris, for example, if you hit the close door button, it actually works. It's closing the door.
See, I think it works. We'll try it on the elevator here.
Yeah,
when we leave.
it definitely works here.
So, yeah, I know that at my old elevator in my old apartment building, the minute you hit that button, it would work. But
most of them don't.
Most of them don't. And the last bit of placebo button stuff was something that I just think is fascinating. Thermostats in hotel rooms. You know how sometimes you're in a room, it feels too stuffy, you go over, you adjust the thermostat, maybe 10 minutes later you think, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit better. Turns out that many are literally
It's like
dummy.
a digital clock.
Yeah. Yeah. Many are just dummy thermostats. In fact, I love this one. Did you read this one? Some guy was called in. He's an engineer. He said these dummy things are placed there to quiet a constant complainer by giving them control. He said, as an engineering trainee, I was sent to calibrate one of these thermostats. When I asked why they had me calibrate a thermostat that was not hooked up, they panicked at the front desk and asked if I told the occupant it wasn't hooked up. After assuring them I hadn't spilled the beans, they admitted that by not telling me it was disconnected, that would enhance the realistic performance of me trying to calibrate the thermostat for the unhappy hotel guests who thought the hotel room was too hot. And then there are good buttons, apparently, and good buttons do work, but I didn't really read that one
So
too.
they said essentially these placebo buttons have the net positive effect on our lives because they give us the illusion of control. It's
Yeah.
something to do in situations where the alternative would to do nothing. And I love, they gave an example in London where they said when you press the crosswalk button, it doesn't work, but a little light comes on and says, wait. So it makes you feel like you did. I'm guilty of it all the time when I'll hit the button to go down and I'll hit it again.
And
And even
again,
if somebody else has hit it, I'll hit it again and I'll feel like I hit the button for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't.
I don't remember the very first host of Talk Soup, and this goes way back, was a stand-up comedian.
Joel?
It wasn't Joel McHale, and it was 2 or 3 back. It was like one of the very first guys that did it. He had a term he used, and so it was a stand-up comic, and it was when the show first launched, and he made up a word called premblememblemation. And you premblememblemate when you put a letter in a mailbox and you close the thing and you open it 2 or 3 times to make sure the letter went down. That's just human behavior stuff, but he would call it premblememblemation. I just remember that one for some reason. Premblememblemation.
Oh my God.
He made it up. It's
A
totally
lot going
made up
on in
thing.
that head, Nash.
But I don't know why it's stuck. Isn't that funny that it went in stuck there? And I remember this thing
Got a
from
lot stuck in there.
All right, that's it for those stories.
That's it for those. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we want to talk about some fall resolutions. Even though now that school has started and we're in the month of September, a lot of people do have New Year's resolutions, but we seem to think, or we don't seem to think, we know that this time of year is the best time to actually catch up on resolutions or start some. So stay with us.
Brought to you by Volkswagen. Visit VW.com to learn more.